On Thanksgiving Day, my daughter-in-law carried my gift out the back door and set it down beside the yard waste. She smiled and said, "Cheap backyard junk." I said nothing, and I left. At the train station that night, my son caught up with me and said, "Dad, you've got one choice. Apologize to Camille and her mother, or you're not part of this family anymore." 19 days later, I bought a one-way ticket west. What I left on that kitchen counter turned my son's face white the morning he found it. And by then, he finally understood what he had let go of. Thank you for being here with me. It means more than I know how to say. Do me a favor, before we start, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from. Your city, your country. I want to know who's in the room tonight. If this story gets under your skin the way these things do, pass it along to somebody who needs it, and stay a while with us. A small note before we begin. This story carries fictional elements, shaped for the telling. The names and the places came out of my head. Everything underneath them is true enough to hurt and worth hearing. There are two kinds of quiet in Charleston in November. There's the quiet of the marsh at low tide, when the wind drops and the grass stops moving, and you can hear a boat motor from a mile off, that one I've known my whole life. And there's the quiet that comes over a room full of people the moment you walk into it. The one where nobody stops talking. They just talk a little differently. That second one took me 68 years to learn how to hear. I've cut stone for 41 years. Limestone, bluestone, granite, coquina, when a job called for it, and the county would allow it. My hands are the kind you notice. The left thumbnail never grew back right after a slab came down on it in 1988. And there's a white seam across the back of my right hand from a chisel that jumped in 1996. Ruth Ann used to take that hand at church and hold it on top of hers in her lap, palm up, like she was showing somebody a receipt. 41 years, and I never once had a job come back on me. Ruth Ann taught third grade at the same school for 34 years. She kept a shoebox in the closet with every thank you note a child ever gave her, and after she passed, 3 years ago last spring, I went through them one at a time over the course of a winter, and it took me that long because I could only do a few a night. She'd made me promise something near the end. She said, "Walter, don't you ever make that boy choose between you and his wife. A man who makes his son choose has already lost him." I gave her my word. I kept it 3 years longer than it deserved to be kept, and I want you to understand that, friend, because later you're going to wonder why I kept driving to that house. That promise is why. That's the whole reason. My son's name is Aaron. He's 37, an architect, good at it. He married Camille Ashford 4 years ago at a church downtown with more flowers in it than I've ever seen in one place. Camille runs a gallery on Broad Street, contemporary work, the kind where the price list is printed on heavy paper and kept in a drawer. Her mother, Vivienne Ashford, sits on the boards of things. When I met Vivienne the first time, she took my hand, looked at it, and said, "Oh, you can always tell a working man." She meant it as a compliment, the way a doctor means a diagnosis. Camille had a son from her first marriage. Theo, he was 4 when they married, and Aaron adopted him legally 2 years after that, in a courtroom on Meeting Street. And I sat in the second row, in a suit that was too warm for June, and cried where nobody could see me. Theo is 6 now. He is entirely, completely himself. He carries a pair of plastic binoculars everywhere he goes, and he has a spiral notebook where he writes down every bird he sees. And his spelling is a crime against the language, but the dates are always right. The house on the Battery had been in the Ashford family since before anybody could name. White, 3 stories, piazzas on the south side, and a garden in the back that a service came and edited twice a month. Thanksgiving was there every year. I went every year. I brought something every year. This year I brought a stone. I'd started it in late September. A piece of Indiana limestone, 12 by 18, that I'd been saving since a job in Beaufort fell through in 2014. I cut it down, squared it, and worked it for 5 weeks in the evenings out in my shop behind the house on Ashley Hall Road, with the radio on the AM station and the door open to the yard. I cut Theo's name into it in Roman letters, hand-carved, not sandblasted, and above the name I carved a Carolina wren, the little brown bird with the white eyebrow stripe and the tail that stands straight up like it has an opinion. It's Theo's favorite. He'd told me so at Easter, and I'd written it down on the back of a receipt when he wasn't looking. A carved wren is harder than it sounds. The eyebrow stripe is one continuous cut, and if your hand jumps, the bird looks surprised. I did it 3 times on scrap before I touched the good stone. It was a garden marker for the flower bed under his window, and it weighed a little under 40 pounds, and I loaded it into the truck the night before, wrapped in 2 moving blankets and a bed sheet Ruth Ann had bought at an outlet mall in 2003. I got there at 1 o'clock. I wore the gray suit. Camille's mother opened the door herself, which I understood later was not an accident. "Walter," she said. How prompt. She looked past me at the truck. "Did you bring something?" "You really mustn't." "Just something for Theo's garden?" I said. "How thoughtful." She held the door, and I came into the hall, and the hall smelled like beeswax and roasting and somebody's perfume. There were maybe 20 people in the front rooms. I heard a woman laugh at the exact pitch people use when they want the room to know they're enjoying themselves. Camille came out of the dining room in a green dress. "Walter, happy Thanksgiving." She kissed the air beside my cheek. "Listen, we've had to be a little creative with the seating. My father's colleagues came in from Atlanta, and the table simply won't stretch. We've put a place for you in the sunroom. It's really much more comfortable. You can see the whole garden." The sunroom was off the back hall, past the butler's pantry where the caterers were staging. There was a card table set up with one place, and a linen napkin, and a water glass already poured, which I couldn't decide was kind or arranged. Through the doorway I could see the long table with the good silver and the low flowers, and I could see my son standing beside the fireplace with a drink in his hand, and he looked up, and our eyes met across that house for maybe 2 seconds, and then he turned to the man beside him and laughed at something. I set my hat on the chair. I sat down. I poured myself more water I didn't want, and I thought about the kitchen table on Ashley Hall Road where Aaron did his homework for 12 years, and how Ruth Ann would set a glass of milk down beside his elbow without saying a word or breaking his concentration, because she understood that some kinds of love work best when they don't announce themselves. Then I heard running. Small feet, fast, no interest in the long way around. Theo came around the corner of the pantry at full speed in a button-down shirt he'd already worked most of the way, untucked, binoculars swinging on their string. "Grandpa Walter." He was out of breath. "I found you." "You always do," I said. He hit me around the middle, and I put my arm around his shoulders, and something in my chest that had been sitting tight since the front door made a little room. "There's a hawk," he said, "on the chimney of the blue house. I saw it for 11 seconds. 11's a good long look." "I know." He climbed into the other chair, which had no place setting, and put the binoculars on the table between us like a man setting down his tools. "Are you eating in here?" "Looks that way." He considered the room. He looked at the one napkin and the one glass. 6 years old, and I watched him do the arithmetic, and I watched him decide not to say the answer out loud, which is a thing I have seen grown men fail to do. "I'll eat in here too," he said. "You don't have to. I want to." He noticed my phone on the table then, and he picked it up the way children pick up anything that lights, and I told him he could take pictures of the garden if he wanted. He mashed at it with his thumbs for a while. I wear hearing aids, have, since 2019, a lifetime of stone saws, and they pair to that phone, and there's an app, and I do not fully understand the app. I know that. I have made my peace with it. While he was fooling with it, I reached into my inside pocket and took out the photograph. It was Ruth Ann on the front steps of our house in the summer of 2017, one hand up against the sun, laughing at something I said that I'd give a great deal to remember. I'd had it reprinted at the drugstore in September because the original had gone soft at the corners from being carried. "Can I show you something?" I said. Theo put the phone down immediately and leaned in, the way kids do when they can tell something real is coming. He studied it a long time, not a polite glance. The other kind. "She's laughing with her whole face," he said. "She did that. I remember she smelled like the pink soap. My throat did something I wasn't ready for. I pressed my thumb into the corner of my eye and cleared it out and said, 'That's exactly right. She'd be glad you remembered. Is it okay that I miss her?' I only knew her a little bit. 'Missing somebody isn't about how long,' I said. It's about what they left in the room. He nodded slowly, filing it. Then he picked up my phone again and held it over the photograph, very serious. I'm recording it. For evidence. Evidence of what? Of her, he said, like I was slow. I was watching his face, the small frown, the concentration when I heard heels on the pine floor behind me. Camille stopped at the edge of the table and looked down at the photograph with the brief, tidy attention of a woman deciding what needs picking up. Walter. A family photo? Out on the table? During service? It had the shape of a question and the weight of something already settled. She reached past Theo's shoulder and took it between two fingers, turned, and handed it to a young man going by with a tray of used glasses. Would you set this somewhere safe? Thank you so much. He took it without looking at it, the way you take anything at the end of a long shift, and kept walking, and my wife went off into the kitchen on a tray of dirty crystal. Theo's mouth came open. His whole body went stiff, the way a child goes stiff when something happens too fast and wrong, and it takes a second for the understanding to catch up. Then his eyes went bright and enormous, and he turned and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him. The particular ruin of a kid who has just watched an adult do something he didn't know adults were allowed to do. I put both hands flat on the card table and pressed down and felt the cloth under them, because what was moving through my chest right then needed to go somewhere that wasn't my face. Grandpa Walter, he said, and his voice came out about half its normal size. I'm sorry. Come here, I said. He came around and put his face in the shoulder of my gray suit and breathed the unsteady way a child breathes when he is working very hard not to cry in a house full of adults. That was not one bit your fault. Not any part of it. He pulled back after a minute, wiped his face with the back of his wrist, and then practical, the way kids shift gears. He picked up my phone and pushed it into the breast pocket of my jacket, patting it flat like he'd seen his father do 100 times. So it stays safe, he said. Good thinking. He climbed back into his chair and straightened his shirt and did not say one more word about the photograph or the woman who took it. Neither did I. But I sat with my hand resting over that pocket for the rest of the time I was in that room, and I could feel, faint, through the wool, the small square weight of a thing that was still going. If you've ever sat at the little table in a house where you were supposed to be family, the card table, the folding chair, the seat by the kitchen door, do me a favor and tell me where you're listening from. City and country. I read them. I want to know how many of us there are. Theo got called upstairs around 2:30. He hugged me hard, the way he hugs everything, like he's trying to leave a dent, and went off after a woman in a black apron without looking back. 10 minutes later, I decided to bring the stone in. I got it from the truck myself, 40 pounds, and a bad hip, and I didn't ask anybody. And I carried it through the back door into the kitchen hall and set it on the counter, still wrapped in the bedsheet. Aaron was in the hall with a bottle in his hand. Dad, what is that? It's for Theo, I said. Garden marker. Get your wife. I'd rather do it once. Camille came, and her mother came behind her, because Vivian Ashford has never in her life let a moment happen in a room she wasn't in. I folded back the sheet. The limestone came up pale under the kitchen lights, and the wren sat above the letters with its tail up, and the shadow in the carving did what a hand-cut letter does, that a machine one never will. It moved a little when you moved. Aaron went quiet. He set the bottle down. Dad, when did you... September. Evenings. Camille tipped her head. She put one finger on the top edge, the way you'd test a countertop in a showroom. Well, that is a lot of work, she said. Vivienne, look. Vivienne looked. The trouble, Camille said, is the garden's been designed. The whole rear is Ellsworth's plan. We've had it 3 years. You can't just set a... She moved her hand, looking for the word, and found it, and used it, a headstone, into a designed bed. It's rather cemetery, isn't it? And honestly, Walter, it's very heavy, and it'll sink, and then the whole line's off. It'll sit on a gravel pad, I said. I brought the gravel. You brought gravel. She laughed. Just a little. To my house. On Thanksgiving. I did. She turned to the caterer's man who was coming through with a bus tub, and she said, in that pleasant, easy voice that doesn't rise at all. Would you be an angel and take this out back for me? Just set it by the yard waste. We'll deal with it later. And then, to her mother, with a smile, not even lowering her voice. Honestly, cheap backyard junk. Where does he think we live? The young man took the sheet corner and hauled the stone off the counter with a grunt and carried it out the screen door and set it down on the brick beside the 2 green bins and the pile of pruned camellia branches and let the screen door bang. And Aaron said nothing. That's the part, friend, not the stone. I've broken stone before. My son stood 4 feet from me in that kitchen with his hand on a bottle, and he looked at the floor, and he did not open his mouth. I picked up my hat. Camille, I said, I've worked in a lot of houses in this town. Built some of the walls holding this street up. I've never once been in a home where the hostess set a man's gift outside with the trimmings and called it hospitality. I said it level, not loud. Level. Happy Thanksgiving to you both. And I walked out the front door, past the flowers and the low table and the men from Atlanta, and I did not look at my son, because if I looked at my son, I was going to stop walking, and I was not going to stop walking. The North Charleston station at night doesn't smell like much of anything but diesel and floor cleaner. I'd had a ticket up to Ruth Ann's sister in Hamlet for the holiday weekend since October. That was the plan all along. Dinner at the Battery, and then the 840 North. I sat on the bench under the departure screen with a coffee from the machine and my hat on my knee, and I thought about nothing in particular, which is what I do when I'm thinking about everything. Ruth Ann and I stood in a station like that one, in the spring of 1984, when we had no money and a car that wouldn't start, and she bought a crossword out of a rack and did most of it while we waited, and read the clues out loud, and took my wrong answers seriously. I was, without any question, the happiest I have ever been. I was somewhere in 1984 when I heard my name. Aaron came through the doors fast, coat open, keys still in his hand. Dad, stop. I'm sitting still, son. He stopped a few feet off, breathing hard. Do you have any idea what you just did in there? I said one sentence and I left. That's what I did. That's what... He pressed the heel of his hand into his forehead, and he did it exactly the way his mother did it, and my chest closed up like a fist. Camille is humiliated. Vivienne is calling people. Dad, do you understand what that costs me? What my life is? Tell me what it costs. It cost me 4 years learning how to be in that room, how to talk, what not to say, what never ever to bring up. His voice was going. And you walk in with a 40-pound rock and blow the whole thing up in one afternoon because your feelings got hurt. My feelings, I said. Yes, it was a lawn ornament, Dad. It was a rock, and you turned it into a referendum. I looked at my son, 37 years old, standing in a train station on Thanksgiving night with his coat open in the cold, shaking. Not from anger. I could see it in the hand holding the keys. She took your mother's picture off the table and handed it to a boy carrying dirty glasses, I said. She put a thing I made with these hands for your son out by the bins and called it junk in front of me, and I sat in the sunroom for 2 hours, while her mother explained to me very politely that I don't sit at the table. I didn't make it big, Aaron. It already was. I just said it out loud one time. He stared at me, and underneath the fury there was something else that I didn't have a name for yet. Then he straightened his back and lifted his chin and said the thing he came there to say. You've got one choice, Dad. You come back tomorrow and you apologize. To Camille, to Vivienne, to the whole table. Really apologize. Not the kind where the words are right and your face says something else. He held my eyes. Or you go on home and you stay there. Because I can't keep being the rope in the middle. Your pride isn't worth my marriage. The screen clicked over. My train came up in white letters. I looked at him a long moment, looked for his mother in the shape of his jaw, and found some, and not enough. Son, I said, who taught you to stand in a room and say nothing? Because it wasn't me, and it wasn't her. He opened his mouth. He closed it. Happy Thanksgiving, Aaron, I said. I dropped the cup in the trash can by the bench and picked up my hat and walked toward the platform. He called after me once. Just Dad. The way he called it when he was 9 and didn't get what he wanted and couldn't understand why. It went through me like cold water down the back of the neck, and I kept walking, because some things you feel all the way to the bone and still don't stop for. I sat by the window and watched the lights of the yard slide back, and I thought about that word, choice. One choice. A man tells you that you have one choice, and what he means is he'd like you to stop looking around the room. I looked around the room. Somewhere north of Kingstree, I started thinking about a third thing. I came back down Sunday night. The house on Ashley Hall Road looked exactly the way I'd left it, and that was the hard part. Not the quiet. I'd learned the quiet. 3 years of it, I knew what corners it liked. The hard part was that nothing had changed inside those walls, while something enormous had changed outside them. I hung my jacket on the hook by the door where it's hung for 26 years, and I sat down at the kitchen table without taking off my shoes, which Ruth Ann would have had a fast and firm opinion about. And something kept pulling at the back of my mind, small and specific, the way a splinter announces itself. The phone was still in the breast pocket where Theo had put it. I got it out and set it on the table and looked at it a while. Then I opened the app I don't understand, and there it was, a file. 2 hours and 11 minutes long. Started at 1:52 p.m. The first part was what I expected. The room noise of that house. Theo's voice, she's laughing with her whole face. My own voice, rougher than I think it is, saying that thing about what people leave in the room. I had to stop it and start it again. The recording had kept going after Theo went upstairs. It had run in my jacket through the kitchen, and the stone, and the front door, and the whole ride to the station. And at 1 hour and 41 minutes, in what two people plainly believed was an empty back hall, I heard Camille. The workshop parcel appraises higher than the house lot. That's the thing nobody understood. Then Vivian, unhurried, the voice of a woman making a grocery list. And the authorization is clean? It's a durable power of attorney. He signed it at Roper the morning of the hip. Aaron handed it to him with the anesthesia consent and the insurance forms. He signed 6 things in 90 seconds, Mother. He didn't read one of them. And Aaron thinks he signed a medical authorization. He'll go on thinking that. A pause. A glass set down. The survivor benefit's been rerouting since March. The line of credit on the shop closes in January. I stopped it. I sat there in that kitchen on Ashley Hall Road, and I looked at the watercolor Ruth Ann, painted of the back fence in 2015, the one where she got the light wrong on the pecan tree and the roses exactly right. And I breathed in and out slow, the way I learned to breathe on a site when something structural has already failed, and panic is the one thing that will make it worse. I looked at my hands on the table, the thumbnail that never came back, the white seam from 96. These hands built things that are still standing. They were not shaking. I got up and called Marcus Webb. Marcus and I set our first wall together in 1985, and he still won't retire. And never once in 40 years have I gotten to his kitchen and found the coffee not already made. He picked up on the second ring, and his voice went from asleep to awake in the space of one word, the way it does with men who've spent a lifetime taking calls after midnight. Walter, what happened? Come by at 8, I said. Bring the number for that lawyer your sister used on the estate. And Marcus, I'm going to need you to hear something, and not say anything until it's done. He was there at 7:40. He listened to it standing up, both hands on the back of a chair, completely still, the way he listens to anything that matters. When it finished, he set the phone down and looked at me. They forged nothing, he said slowly. That's what's ugly about it. They didn't have to forge a thing. They got you to sign it. I know. Walter, a durable POA, presented alongside surgical consents, with material misrepresentation that's not a family squabble. That's fiduciary fraud. That's a criminal referral if you want it to be. I want to do it right, I said. Not fast. Right. There's a difference. There always is. Her name was Inez Delgado. Office on Cumming Street, 2 chairs, a window unit, and a wall of banker's boxes. She shook my hand like she meant it and said, "Sit down, Mr. Boone. Walk me through it in order." I put a yellow legal pad on her desk. 7 items, numbered, no adjectives, the way I've written a spec sheet for 41 years. Revoke the power of attorney with notice to every institution. Freeze and restore the survivor benefit. Kill the line of credit on the shop before January. Change the beneficiary on everything, everything, everything. Sell the workshop parcel, myself, at market, to a mason I'd choose. Put the house on Ashley Hall Road in a trust my son could not be pressured into signing away. Ines wrote fast and didn't interrupt. And item 7? She said. An education trust, I said. For Theodore Boone, 6 years old. Irrevocable. Funded from the workshop sale. She put her pen down. Mr. Boone, Theo is your daughter-in-law's son. He's my grandson. He's not a biological. Ma'am, I said, I heard you the first time. She looked at me for a moment. Then she picked her pen back up and said, Who do you want as trustee? Because it cannot be you, and it very much cannot be his mother. That's how Delphine Rousseau came into it. She called me on a Tuesday, on her lunch break, from the parking lot of the accounting firm on Calhoun where she'd worked 11 years as an assistant to the Ashfords' estate man. She'd rehearsed it. You could hear that she'd rehearsed it. Mr. Boone, I've made copies of things since June. I didn't know who to give them to. I've picked up the phone twice before and hung up. Why now, Miss Rousseau? The pause wasn't evasion. It was somebody deciding how honest to be. My father's a plasterer, she said. 30 years. Last spring he bid a restoration for the gallery, and Mrs. Ashford's daughter told him, in front of his crew, that they use real artisans for the interior work. Another pause. Shorter. I made the first copies that night. She sent everything. Statement histories. The internal emails. The scan of the POA with the timestamp on the hospital's own consent packet 3 pages behind it, which is the thing that ended it. In the end, the timestamp. That was the first week of December. I want to be straight with you before I go on, friend, because what happens next is the part I still think about, and I want you sitting with me for it. There's something my son found on that kitchen counter, and what it did to him is the reason I'm telling you any of this at all. If you're still with me, type the number 7 in the comments, so I know. I read them. Stay right here. The next part is the one that takes the wind out of you. I sold the shop in December to a fellow named Ellis Purdy, who'd apprenticed under me in 2001, and who cried when I handed him the keys, which I pretended not to notice, and he pretended I didn't notice, and we shook hands. Then I made the last thing. A mantel shelf. Bluestone, 40 inches, 3 inches thick, honed on the face and left rough on the return. Into the front edge I cut, in her handwriting, not a font, her actual hand, off the back of a church program she'd written a grocery list on in 2011, Ruth Ann Hollis Boone. Hollis was her father's name. It was Aaron's middle name, too, until the year he married, and it came off the letterhead and the wedding program, and eventually off everything, because Camille said it sounded country. Under the shelf, I hollowed a shallow pocket, and in the pocket I put a metal tin, and in the tin I put a flash drive. I recorded it in the kitchen with the phone propped on a coffee can. No script. I tried to write one and threw it out because it sounded like a man performing a version of himself he thought the occasion called for, and Ruth Ann never had 1 minute of patience for that. Aaron, if you're watching this, you've been in the house and found it empty and found this. I'm not angry. I was angry Thanksgiving night and it passed the way it always does. I'm going because I heard something in your voice at that station that told me I'd become a thing you were managing, a problem on your list. And a father shouldn't be that to his son, not while he still has a say. I stopped. Started again. The accounts are closed. The power of attorney is revoked, and I need you to understand that I know you didn't write it. I know she handed it to you, and I know you handed it to me, and I know you thought it was for the anesthesiologist. That's not nothing, son. But it's not innocence either, and only one of us can figure out which it is. The shop is sold. The house goes in a trust. There's a school fund for Theo that nobody can touch. Not her, not her mother, not you, not me. And whatever you decide to be next, whoever you are when there's nobody in the room to perform for, I hope you pick the true one. Your mother always did. It's what made her the best person I ever stood next to. I set the shelf in the center of the kitchen counter, square to the edge. I turned off the light. Marcus drove me to the station at 5 in the morning on the 18th of December with one canvas bag in the back of the truck. That's it, he said. That's all I need. Southwest Chief, west out of Chicago, 2 days across, getting off at a little brick platform at Lamy, New Mexico, 18 miles south of Santa Fe. I'd bought a collapsing adobe outside Galisteo in November. Sight unseen except for photographs, mud walls, 2 feet thick, a caved-in portal, and Vegas that a man who knew what he was looking at could tell were still sound. Ruth Ann had wanted to see New Mexico. She brought it up 3 separate times over 39 years. Once from a magazine in a dentist's office in 2002, once when a cousin went, and once on the back steps in 2018, 8 months before the diagnosis, out of nowhere, the way she said things that had been sitting in her mind a while. Walter, we should go see that light everybody talks about. We didn't go the next spring. There wasn't a next spring, not that kind, and New Mexico went into the pile of things we meant to do, which by the end was a bigger pile than I liked to look straight at. At the station in Chicago, waiting on the connection, I sent one message. It took me 4 tries, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I kept saying more than was necessary. And an important message should only be as long as the truth requires. I found a 3rd thing, son. I hope one day you find yours. Dad. 40 seconds later, the phone rang. His name. His picture, him laughing at something Marcus said at a cookout 6 years ago, head back, and in that picture for about 1 second, he looked so much like his mother that I'd made it his contact photo and never told him why. It rang 4 times. I turned it face down on my knee. It rang twice more. It stopped. A voicemail came up. I didn't listen to it. Marcus called me on my 5th morning in Galisteo, sitting on a wall in 50-degree December sun with a coffee, watching a roadrunner cross a pinon shadow like he had somewhere to be. Aaron had gone to the house on the 23rd. Marcus was across the street because I'd asked him to be. He watched my son let himself in with a key, and he watched the kitchen light come on, and then he watched nothing happen for a very long time. 11 minutes, Marcus said, which is a long time to watch a lit window where a man isn't moving. Then Aaron came out carrying that 40-pound shelf against his chest with both arms, walked to his car, and stood at the trunk, and couldn't figure out how to open it with his hands full. He set it down on the tailgate, and he stood there in the driveway on the 23rd of December, and put both hands flat on that stone and put his head down. How long? I asked. Long enough that I looked away, Marcus said. Delphine called on the 4th of January, and after that about once a week for a while, and I'm going to give you the parts that mattered. The line of credit died before it closed. The survivor benefit came back, all of it, with a letter of apology from an institution that does not write those. Hines filed the revocation with notice to 11 parties, and the 11th was the Ashford family's own estate attorney, who read the timestamp on the hospital packet and, Delphine said, went out to his car and sat in it. Camille's board asked her to step back from the gallery in February, not fired. They don't say fired down there. They say step back pending a review that was still pending when they sold the Broad Street lease in June. Vivian resigned 2 board seats in 1 week, citing her health, which was excellent, and Aaron moved out on the 9th of February. Delphine told it the way she told everything, in order, without decorating it. He took clothes and a drafting stool and the bluestone shelf. He took a 1-bedroom above a print shop in Park Circle, where the machines run until 9 and you can feel them in the floor. He filed in March with his own lawyer, a woman he found himself, and he asked for joint custody of Theodore Hollis. Boone asked for it, fought for it, and got it in August. Alternating weeks, the school year split, and it holds today. I want that clear, because I know somebody out there is asking. Aaron adopted that boy in a courtroom in June 4 years ago, and no judge in Charleston County was going to pretend otherwise. And in April, he petitioned the court to restore his middle name. Camille came to Galisteo in September. She'd flown into Albuquerque and driven up, and she stood at the end of my drive in shoes entirely wrong for that ground. And I came down off the ladder, where I'd been setting a new lintel over the portal, and wiped my hands on my jeans, and said, "Ma'am," she had a folder. She wanted a letter, a statement, she said, characterizing the POA business as a family misunderstanding. For the review, for the record, for her mother. I asked her if she'd like water, because it was 91 degrees. She said no. "I'm not going to write it," I said. "Walter, I'm not going to write it. And I'm not going to say one unkind word to you standing on my own place. And those two things are both going to be true at the same time. I said it easy. You've got a long drive back. There's a good green chili place in Cirillo's. Halfway. Tell them Walter sent you, and they won't know who that is. But it's a good place anyway. She stood there for a second, and I watched her wait for me to get bigger, get louder, give her something she could take home and be angry about. I didn't have it. That's the thing nobody tells you, friend. Being kind to somebody who wronged you is the one thing they can't do anything with. She got in the car and she drove down and turned east, and that was the last time I saw her. The letters started in the spring. Theo's first one had 11 birds in it, and 4 of them were made up. The second one had a drawing of a Carolina wren with the eyebrow stripe, and I've got it up on the beam over the door where the light hits it in the afternoon, and it's the best piece of art anybody's ever going to give me. Aaron wrote 2 long ones, and he didn't ask for anything in a single one of them, which is how I knew. In one of them, he wrote a line I've thought about every week since. He said, "I kept believing if I got it right enough times, one day it would be enough. Dad, it was never going to be enough." There was no number. I called Marcus that night and said, "Tell him the door's open." Not before he's ready. But tell him. They came at Christmas. I heard the car on the gravel, that particular slow crunch of somebody who's driven a long way and is finally stopping, and I did not put down the trowel, because some things you have to let come to you. Then I heard the running. Grandpa Walter. Theo hit me at full speed, binoculars and all, and I got both arms around him, and my eyes went hot, and I let them. 7 years old now. Heavier. Same dent. Aaron came up the drive behind him, carrying something in 2 arms, and he stopped about 20 feet off, and neither one of us ran, because we are Boones, and Boones take a minute. "You didn't tell me you were okay," he said. I had to hear it from Marcus. I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it from me. I've been standing on my own for 10 months, Dad. I know, I said. I've been keeping track. He came the rest of the way. What he was carrying was the limestone, the wren. He'd gone back to that house on the Battery in January, while the movers were there, and taken it off the brick beside the bins, where it had sat for 6 weeks in the rain, and he'd kept it in a 1-bedroom apartment above a print shop for a year, because there was no garden to put it in. I didn't know where it went, he said. So I just kept it. There's a bed under the front window, I said. It faces east. Wrens like the low brush, and there's plenty. Theo was already gone to look at it. And I'll tell you the truth, I did not tell my son it was all right. It wasn't all right. What I told him was that he could come at Christmas and in the summer, and that his boy could come whenever he wanted for as long as he wanted, and that Vivian Ashford will never in her life set foot on this ground, and neither will her daughter, and that some doors you close, and you don't stand around apologizing for the fact that they're closed. He said, I know. He said it like a man who'd already done that arithmetic himself. We set the stone the next morning, the 2 of us, on a gravel pad, level to a bubble, facing the sun. So that's all of it. An old man, a card table in a sunroom, a photograph handed off on a tray of dirty glasses, a stone put outside with the yard trimmings, and a mud house in New Mexico with a wren carved in limestone under the front window. People are going to call what I did revenge, getting even, settling up. I want to be honest with you, because you stayed this long and you've earned it. It wasn't revenge. Revenge is hot, and it's fast, and it makes you feel wonderful for about 9 minutes. What I did was cold and slow, and it took a lawyer and a legal pad and 7 numbered lines, and most of a year of paying very close attention. Call it keeping my own name, if it needs a name. And I'm not a perfect father. I want that on the record. I sat too long at tables where nobody had saved me a chair. I mistook staying for loving. I told myself that being agreeable was the same as being kind, and it is not, and I lost 3 years of my son's life to that mistake, and I don't get those back. So don't do what I did, friend. Don't spend years setting a place for people who quietly stopped planning to come. The ones who belong at your table will pull up their own chair, and you will never once have to ask them twice. An old preacher told me something the winter after Ruth Ann died. He said the Lord never promised us the people we love would choose right. He only promised we don't have to carry their choices to the grave. I've held on to that through every hard mile of this. If Walter Boone's story sat down next to you tonight, if you've ever been the one in the sunroom, or the one who finally stopped asking, or the one still deciding, tell me in the comments. Your city, your country, and your piece of it. I read every single one, and I don't say that the way people say it. And if somebody you love needs to hear this today, send it to them. It costs you nothing, and it might cost them one more year of waiting on a chair that isn't coming. Stay with us if you'd like. There's more worth telling. One last note before I go. The stories ahead carry fictional elements, shaped to hold truths I believe are worth carrying. If that's not the kind of thing you came for, no hard feelings in the world, step out here with my full respect, and go find what speaks to you. Take good care of yourself. And thank you for staying to the very last word.